Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a really fascinating journey into emotional intelligence, but we're coming at it from, well, quite a unique angle. Forget the usual personality quizzes for a minute.
Right.
We're diving straight into the hardware, the brain itself. Specifically, we're looking at what happens to our emotional abilities when, parts of the brain get damaged. Brain lesions, they're called.
Exactly. Brain lesions,
Yeah.
areas of damage from injury or illness,
Yeah.
are sources for this deep dive. They really explore this compelling intersection of neuroscience and psychology.
Okay.
It's the study of people with these lesions. By seeing how these injuries affect their ability to perceive, understand, manage emotions,
Yeah.
well, we get incredibly valuable insights.
Insights into the neural foundations, yeah. The brain basis of it all.
Precisely.
So our mission today, it's kind of twofold. First, let's unpack what these brain injury studies really tell us about the specific brain areas, the networks that support our emotional lives. And second, we need to take an honest look at the challenges, because researchers face some real hurdles in this very complex field.
Definitely. It's not straightforward.
All right, let's dig in then. When we talk about emotional intelligence, EI, what are we actually talking about? What's the core idea?
Well, at its heart, emotional intelligence, or EI, it's really the capacity to perceive, use, understand, and manage emotions.
Okay.
This framework, it comes mostly from Mayer and Salevi's work way back in '97. It's more than just having feelings.
Right, it's about handling them.
Yeah, skillfully navigating them, both inside ourselves and crucially in how we interact with other people.
Can you break down those 4 bits? Perceiving, using, understanding, managing. What does that look like day to day?
Sure. So perceiving emotions, that starts with just recognizing them, in yourself, obviously, but also seeing them in others.
Like faces.
Faces, definitely. Tone of voice, the language people use. It's picking up on those cues.
And using emotions.
Using emotions
Yeah.
means harnessing those feelings to actually help your thinking. Using them for problem solving, maybe creativity.
Interesting. Not just being ruled by them.
Exactly. Then there's understanding emotions, and that goes a bit deeper. It's about grasping, like the nuances of emotional language.
So knowing the difference between, say, annoyed and furious.
Precisely. And understanding how emotions shift and change, how one might lead to another. And finally, managing emotions.
The big one, maybe?
It often feels like it's about regulating your own emotional responses, but also about being able to, positively influence others' emotions, all geared towards personal growth and smoother social interactions.
That makes a lot of sense broken down like that. So with those different facets in mind, what have these lesion studies revealed? Which parts of the brain are doing what?
This is where it gets really interesting. The evidence, and it comes from both lesion studies and neuroimaging, it points pretty strongly towards 3 key large-scale brain networks.
Networks, not just single spots.
Networks, yeah. Think of them as interconnected hubs that are constantly talking to each other, collaborating. They're critical for EI.
Okay, lay them on us. What are these networks? What do they do?
So the first one is called the salience network. Key parts are the anterior insula and the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex.
Right.
Its main job is basically to detect and integrate stuff that's salient, emotionally important, grabs your attention. It also pulls in interoceptive cues.
What are those again?
Those are the signals from inside your body, like your heart rate, gut feelings, that sort of thing, and other sensory input too.
Okay, so it flags important emotional stuff. What happens if it's damaged?
Well, damage there often leads to real difficulties in recognizing emotions in other people. It's almost like the brain's emotional significance detector is offline or faulty.
Interesting. So someone might just miss the cues or misread someone's feelings entirely.
Exactly. They might struggle with that.
Okay. What's the second network?
The second is the default mode network, or DMN. You've probably heard of this one. Key regions include the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex.
Yeah, isn't that the network that's active when we're like daydreaming or mind wandering?
That's when it's often most active, yes.
Yeah.
When you're not focused on an external task, it's crucial for self-referential processing, thinking about yourself, your experiences.
Right.
But also, really importantly, for empathy and for perspective taking, being able to step into someone else's shoes, see their viewpoint.
Empathy. So lesions there.
Lesions in the DMN tend to impair empathy, and that ability to really grasp perspectives different from your own.
Yeah.
It makes it harder to connect with what someone else is feeling or thinking.
All right. Makes sense. And the third one?
The third critical network is the executive network, Core areas here are the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and the parietal cortex.
Executive. Sounds like the boss.
Kind of like the brain's command center, yeah. It's responsible for cognitive control. Things like working memory, planning, and very relevant here, emotion regulation.
Managing your own feelings.
Exactly. The ability to manage and control your own emotional responses. So damage to this executive network often messes with a person's capacity to regulate their emotions effectively. They might be more impulsive or struggle to calm down.
So just to recap, salience network for detecting emotions, default mode network for empathy and understanding others, and executive network for managing your own emotions. Is that roughly it?
That's a great summary.
Yeah.
And damage to any one of them disrupts a key part of overall emotional intelligence. It really shows EI isn't just one thing.
No, it's this complex interplay: detection, self-awareness, empathy, control.
Precisely. And the Lesion studies provide really strong evidence for this breakdown by carefully mapping where the brain damage is in people with specific emotional difficulties.
You can draw causal links.
You can start to establish more causal links, yes, between specific brain areas within these networks and particular aspects of EI that are impaired.
Can you give us maybe a couple more concrete examples? What have these studies really pinned down?
Sure. So, like Lee said, salience network damage hits emotion recognition. Default mode network damage impairs empathy and perspective taking.
Right.
And executive network lesions really undermine that ability to regulate your own emotions. But what's really quite striking is when you see very specific focal injuries.
Like damage to just one small spot.
Exactly. For instance, damage specifically to the anterior insula, that key part of the salience network, has been pretty consistently linked with significantly lower scores on tasks where people have to recognize emotions in faces or voices.
Wow, so that's a really tight connection. Specific area, specific function.
It provides that sort of concrete link, yes. It's compelling evidence.
It really is. But okay, well, while these findings are obviously important, you mentioned challenges earlier, researching this stuff can't be easy. What are some of the big hurdles?
You're absolutely right. There are some significant ones. One major challenge is that a lot of EI assessment still relies heavily on self-report questionnaires.
Like asking people how good they think they are at this stuff.
Basically, yes. And while those questionnaires are convenient, they're inherently subjective, aren't they?
Yeah, I can see that.
People might not have accurate insight into their own abilities.
Yeah.
Or, they might answer in a way that makes them look good. That's social desirability bias.
Right. You want to seem like a good, emotionally intelligent person.
Exactly. So that reliance on self-report, it makes objectively measuring something so internal and, well, social quite tricky.
That's a really good point. What's another challenge? If you ask someone, they might genuinely believe they're great at reading people, even if, well, they're not.
Precisely. Another big hurdle is what we call limited ecological validity.
Ecological validity, meaning?
Meaning how well the tests we use in the lab actually reflect real life. Many of the standardized behavioral tasks used to measure EI, well, they happen in a controlled setting.
Okay. And
that might not accurately capture how people actually experience and navigate emotions out in the messy real world.
Can you give an example?
Sure, take the MSCEI, the Mayer-Salovey-Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test. It's a well-known ability test, not self-report. But even it has faced questions about whether the tasks like identify emotions in abstract designs or faces really predict how you'll handle, say, a complex argument with your partner or a stressful deadline at work.
Right. Lab performance versus real-world skill, they might not be the same thing at all.
They might not. And there are questions about consistency, reliability sometimes too, so ecological validity is a big one.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. What about a third main challenge?
I'd say a third key challenge is the issue of neural specificity, especially with neuroimaging techniques like fMRI.
How so? They show us brain activity, right?
They do show us which areas are active during certain emotional tasks. But the brain is so interconnected, it's actually quite difficult to definitively isolate individual components of EI, like just perception or just regulation, to very specific, distinct brain circuits.
Because everything works together.
Everything works together. Teasing apart the precise contribution of this area versus that area for this specific facet of EI, it's a really complex undertaking. The signals can be broad.
Okay, so reliance on self-report, tests not matching reality, and the brain being too interconnected to easily map specific functions. Those sound like pretty hefty obstacles.
They are significant, yes.
So what's being done? How are researchers trying to get around these issues and push our understanding forward? What are the future directions?
Well, there are several promising avenues. One major focus is on developing better, more objective behavioral paradigm.
Like better tests?
Better tests, yes, but specifically designed to try and selectively probe each branch of EI perception, use, understanding, management more effectively.
Okay.
And the crucial part is then integrating these more refined behavioral measures with both neuroimaging and careful lesion analysis, getting multiple types of data on the same people.
Combining the approaches for a fuller picture.
Exactly. A more comprehensive, hopefully more accurate picture.
That sounds like a solid strategy. What else is happening?
Another really important direction is leveraging large lesion databases.
More data is better.
In this case, yes. As we gather more extensive data on individuals with various brain injuries, and we combine that with really detailed, high-quality EI assessments.
Linking specific damage to specific deficits across many people.
Precisely. We can use sophisticated mapping techniques, lesion symptom mapping, to identify the anatomical correlates of different EI impairments with much greater precision than before. It helps build that detailed map of the emotional brain.
More data points lead to a clearer map. Got it. Any other paths?
Definitely. We also need more longitudinal studies.
Tracking people over time.
Yes, tracking the development of emotional intelligence across the lifespan. How do these abilities change from childhood through adulthood? And also, cross-cultural studies are vital.
To see if culture shapes how emotions are processed in the brain.
Exactly. How do cultural factors influence emotional processing and expression? And what does that look like neurologically? These give us a much broader context.
Right. EI isn't happening in a vacuum.
Not at all. And one more thing, the increasing integration of computational models.
Yeah.
Using machine learning, for instance.
AI helping out.
In a sense. Using algorithms to analyze these complex combined data sets, the neural data, the behavioral data, to potentially predict EI outcomes based on brain structure and function. It's about finding patterns we might miss.
Wow. So it sounds like the future involves like smarter tests, bigger data sets, looking across time and cultures, and using advanced computation to put it all together.
That sums it up pretty well. These strategies taken together, they really hold the promise of a much more rigorous and hopefully more causal understanding of how our brains actually enable our emotional intelligence.
Well, this has been genuinely fascinating. A real deep dive into the brain's role in EI, seen through this unique lens of brain lesion studies. It's pretty remarkable how damage to those specific networks, the salience, default mode, executive networks, can so clearly disrupt things like recognizing feelings or empathy or keeping your cool.
It really underscores their critical roles.
Yeah. And while, there are definitely challenges in measuring something so, multifaceted and maybe subjective as EI, it sounds like the future research you outlined offers a lot of potential for getting a much more nuanced picture.
I think so. Lesion studies, despite the challenges, they offer this unique window, a powerful way to understand the causal role of different brain regions in our emotional lives. They really highlight the intricate wiring behind it all.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening to chew on. Given what we've discussed about these crucial brain networks, salience, default mode, executive, and the really profound impact their damage can have on emotional abilities, what might be the broader implications?
Implications for what?
For how we understand just the normal everyday variations in things like empathy or social skills that we see all around us in the general population. It makes you wonder, could subtle differences in the structure or function of these very networks from person to person be shaping our individual emotional landscapes and how we connect with each other?
That's a really provocative question, thinking about the neural basis of those individual differences. Yeah, definitely something to mull over.